Rape prosecutions are rarely straightforward, reliant as they so often are on the bravery of victims delivering harrowing personal testimony. But more rape victims than ever before are coming forward. Last year in England and Wales, the total reached 58,000. And yet at the same time, the number of people being charged with the offence has dramatically fallen. In fact, in the last 3 years, it's more than halved. So why is this happening? Well, Newsnight has learnt that hidden targets, introduced by the Crown Prosecution Service in 2016, may have contributed to hundreds of rape cases being dropped.
That's always been our underlying theory, that really they're being driven by trying to improve their conviction rate. The easiest way to do that is to prosecute less cases and to take the weaker cases out of the system.
In law, the CPS's decision to take a case, any case, to court should be based on two things. Firstly, that it's in the public interest, and secondly, that there is more than a 50% chance of it resulting in a conviction. With the number of prosecutions for rape falling year on year from 2015, some started to think that another method was being applied, one that was resulting in fewer rape cases making it to trial. In reaction to the lowest number of convictions for a decade, in September the Centre for Women's Justice, alongside a number of other groups, launched a judicial review, sparked not just by the dramatic drop in numbers, but also by testimony from whistleblowers. We've spoken to someone who attended training for specialist rape prosecutors given by senior CPS lawyers in 2017. Our source tells us that during that training, they were told that the CPS would ideally like to see conviction rates of 61 to 62% for rape. The source also claimed staff were told, if we take 350 weak cases out of the system, our conviction rate goes up to 61%. This was the Director of Public Prosecutions, Max Hill, responding to questions on the decline in the number of prosecutions on the Today programme in September.
There has not been a change in approach from prosecutors at the CPS.
So very clear, no change of policy. But something had changed, and the Law Society Gazette found evidence of it by trawling through the reports written by the inspectors who review the work of the CPS. What we're looking for is this phrase, the CPS level of ambition for success in rape trials, which, as we see, was set at 60%. These targets have never been publicly discussed by the CPS, but in simple terms, prosecutors were being judged, indeed criticised by inspectors, if they missed that target.
You can see why a prosecutor might be risk-averse in, again, not wanting to charge. It's almost turned around the previous problems that we were facing after the complainant's right to appeal. It's almost turned it round, and a prosecutor now saying, well, I don't want to charge because I might be criticised if I don't get a conviction.
It may sound counterintuitive that targets for higher conviction rates would result in fewer cases making it to trial. But think of it this way. You prosecute 10 cases for rape and you win 5 of them. Your conviction rate is 50%. But if you choose to prosecute just the 3 strongest cases and win them all, then your conviction rate is 100%, even though you've convicted fewer people.
Well, we know now figures are that only 1.5% of cases reported result in a conviction. That's a tiny, tiny number of cases reported. And that is extremely worrying because that means that potentially up to 98% of rape allegations are not being prosecuted, which means that there are rapists walking free and victims not getting justice.
In their response to the investigation by the Law Society Gazette, the CPS confirmed the existence of the previously undisclosed targets, saying,
"We stopped using conviction levels of ambition as we acknowledged they were not an appropriate tool to measure our success in bringing the right cases to court." Today, in their response to Newsnight, they added, "CPS policy is clear. Whenever the legal test is met, our dedicated prosecutors will bring charges, no matter how challenging the case. This policy has not changed. Every decision is, and always has been, taken in the same way, following the Code for Crown Prosecutors.
We're told the conviction rate targets for rape are now a thing of the past, but evidence shows that they were still being referenced by Her Majesty's inspectors in reports published as recently as May this year.
Well, joining me now is Nazir Afsal, who was the Crown Prosecution Service's Chief Prosecutor for the North West of England, Baroness Newlove, the Conservative peer and former Victims Commissioner, and Baroness Chakrabarti, the Shadow Attorney General. And Nazir Afsal, let's start with you. Would you agree that setting a target acts as a disincentive to take rapists to court?
That one does, absolutely. I mean, there's always been targets. Let me say at the outset, I don't know a single prosecutor that goes into the office and thinks, I'm not going to prosecute a case. Their job is to bring offenders to justice, make sure that people get a fair trial, etc. But clearly, there's been a substantial amount of evidence over the last few months to which this has been added, namely fewer cases going from the police to the prosecution service, fewer cases being prosecuted, fewer successful convictions. And Harriet and others who work with victims and survivors have been quite clear in their view that something's amiss. And what you've identified in terms of this ambition, which the CPS now say doesn't exist anymore, would have an incentive. I think the most telling line was what was said around the 350 cases. If we don't prosecute them, suddenly our figures look good. Well, that doesn't look good at all. And it demonstrates, I'm afraid, that something was going wrong in the ranch and something that Max Hill and the others have to put right.
Why do you think it was happening?
Well, we can't take what the CPS do in isolation. As I'm sure Shami and others will tell you, resources have been a massive impact. So fewer police officers, fewer prosecutors, fewer courts, fewer judges, etc., etc. That means that they are trying to work with the resources they have, and they've made it seems, a shortcut to do that. Namely, by dealing with fewer cases, we can do better with the cases that we have. And quite rightly, as it's been pointed out by others, including Harriet, it's the wrong approach.
I mean, what's incredible in this is a place like Cheshire, Merseyside, CPS, the inspectorate was berating them, saying, they weren't meeting the target, even though they'd increased the volume of convictions. So they got more rapists off the street, but they were being berated by the inspectorate for not meeting the CPS targets.
Well, I share your view, and I'm sure others too, that doesn't sound right, it doesn't look right. People, ultimately their job is to keep the people of this country safe, working with the police to do that. And if that means that some rapists, sadly, are on the street, well, as Harriet and others have said, that's certainly the wrong approach.
Is there anything, do you think, that victims of those crimes might be able to do now?
Well, I've no doubt whatsoever. I mean, I've dealt with lots of cases retrospectively, cases from the past, who felt they didn't get the justice going back 10, 20, 30 years. There's no time limit, statutory time limit in relation to these cases. There's no reason why the CPS, with the police, cannot look at these cases again and take a different view if needs be.
So they could get the CPS to re-examine it?
They should be able to if the evidence is there.
Nazir Afsal, thank you so much. Baroness Newlove, what's your view on setting targets like this?
Well, I have to say, just listening to the links and Nazir, I'm absolutely appalled, because within this, it's very processy about protecting the CPS, the police and all agencies. Where is the victim voice in all of this? And all these meetings are all in the background. A victim has no right. But listening to what's going on makes me even more angry, even though I'm a former Victims Commissioner, to say we are no better off at all for the victim. No confidence. The whole criminal justice system is falling apart. We've got less courts, we've got less judges. Where do you expect victims and survivors to have confidence to go to the criminal justice system, to be believed, to investigate, to get a trial, and to actually get justice? And all of that is scraped away. When you have targets, you are purely missing the point. There's a human element to this side.
Do you think the past governments have taken the issues of rape convictions seriously enough? I mean, charities have accused the authorities of decriminalising sex attacks.
I have said that myself, is in Hansard. I do feel that this has become so foggy area. We've had people that were innocent charged, you know, and we've had reactive attitudes to this. But there is people out there who are suffering from rape and abuse and are waiting for a system to help them through and understand what they're going through. It is never easy for any gender who has been raped to go to an authority and say, I have been raped. It's never easy, but it seems to be the system behind the scenes is all mishmashed. One blames the other, one lights targets. You know, it's not about money and it's not about politics. Take politics out of this. We need a system that's safe for victims, for them to go through. And until we get victims' rights in legal law, there is nothing a victim can do. Nazir just said, Nazir's just said if it's extra evidence. That isn't easy to do, because what they do is, and most of the victims I've spoken to over the 7 years, they would never recommend another person reporting a victim of rape. And that says it all.
You say take politics out of it. Mr. Afsal was talking about the cuts to the CPS. Do you think that those 25% budget cuts by your party are to blame for this?
I don't think it. I think austerity has a huge issue to this, and I'm not going to deny that. If you lead something on a shoestring, yes, there's going to be consequences.
But that was your party's policy.
Yeah, I know it was my party's policy, and as an independent victims commissioner, I'm not going to milk this up and put a duvet around it. What I'm saying in all of this, years ago there was plenty of prosecutors, and we still had terrible conviction rates. We still had terrible victims' journeys. So actually, at the end of the day, it's about special training. But we have to have empathy for the victims. We've got Sir Richard Henrique's report to say, call them complainants, don't believe them. Where does the victim stand on that? So that's why I say take politics out of this. And that, as Victims Commissioner, I want to make sure we look at the victim's journey first and foremost. Don't play around with them and don't use politics.
Thank you so much. And Shami Chakrabarti, what's your view on what we've uncovered about these hidden targets?
This is a very serious scandal. I'm shocked, actually, and I've known that there's been a problem. We've all known that there's a problem in the criminal justice system generally, on its knees. The politics can't completely be out of it because austerity is a political choice. We've known that there's been a particular problem in rape trials because they are labour intensive. You have to have resources and you have to have sensitivity and all that goes with that. Harriet Wistridge and her colleagues have been saying for the last couple of years that they believed that there was a secret policy of setting a higher charging standard. You've uncovered now, with the help of the Law Society Gazette, this ambition, that's a target, and that this 60% threshold was being used instead of the normal test, which is 50% plus.
So do you rule out targets of any kind when it comes to this sort of a crime?
The test has to be, is it more likely than not that you can get a conviction for this 50%. Case? We've got to understand that, yes, rape cases are some of the hardest, but they're also some of the most serious in the criminal law. After murder, what could be more serious than a rape? And it's not just women who suffer from rape, but they are the majority of rape victims. This is a scandal. This would be a scandal in the developing world. This would be a scandal anywhere in the world, but in the fifth richest nation on earth. And we've got politicians, I'm afraid, like Mr. Johnson, doing photo ops with police officers. Meanwhile, there aren't enough police officers, there aren't enough trained prosecutors, there aren't enough services, including therapeutic services.
And do you think this is about cuts when it comes to this story?
I think it's a combination. I think I pay a tribute, by the way, to Baroness Newlove, because she might be a Conservative, but she has been a fearless, independent voice for victims, no question about that. But austerity does matter, and it is a political choice because you can't keep people safe on the cheap. But the secrecy of these targets is a scandal in itself. I don't blame officers on the ground or prosecutors on the ground. I blame those with political responsibility for this, a system that's been creaking since 2010. Waiting times between complaint and charge have gone up by 140%.
So are you planning to reverse the cuts to the CPS?
We're going to, absolutely, but we also
How much would that cost?
Well, the thing is, we don't exactly know the scale of the problem because it's been shrouded in secrecy.
25% cuts? No, third of staff gone?
Well, the 25% cuts have clearly taken their toll, but what we need to do is to now have a proper investigation into what's been going on. I think we might need to have anonymous testimony from people working in the system to find out what else has been hidden from us before we can really begin to turn this thing around. But this is an absolute scandal. Tribute to you and the Law Society Gazette, but I have to say I'm almost shaking with shock at this, and a lot of your viewers will be as well.
So we'll see that in the manifesto when it's unveiled next week, something about the CPS?
I think we're going to have to do something very serious about a scandal of this kind.
Add it to the manifesto now.
Well, obviously, I don't unilaterally, but you have my word. As long as I'm shadow attorney, aspiring to be attorney, this will be completely unacceptable.
But you can't, I suppose you can't just throw money at it. It's almost a change in mindset, isn't it? It's something about, you know,
right,
every time someone's acquitted, it's seen as a failure, a catastrophe.
And it isn't. It isn't a failure. It is not, because we believe in the presumption of innocence. We want fair trials, but that doesn't mean you run away from bringing difficult investigations and prosecutions. We need a different mindset, not a blame culture where demoralised professionals are hiding behind secret targets and pointing the finger of blame at each other. It's a failure of leadership, that's political leadership and senior management, and it's got to be stopped.
Chakrabarti, Nazir, Afsal, Baroness Newlove, thank you so much for joining us. And we did ask a member of the government to come on this programme to discuss this, but they declined.